2025 NFL season is still a couple of months away, but why not go ahead and try and give some early predictions? So in today's video, I want to talk about 6 potential teams that missed the playoffs last year that could potentially make the playoffs in 2025. Subscribe and hit the like button if you guys do go on to enjoy the video. Let's hop into it. So before we get into the 6 teams I have for you guys today, I did want to throw out 2 honorable mentions, and those are going to be the Cincinnati Bengals and the Indianapolis Colts. For the Cincinnati Bengals, it really does depend on this defense. Offensively, you're going to have the firepower with Joe Burrow, Jamar, and T. It just kind of comes down to, can this defense be like top 20 in the league? And then for Indianapolis, it's quite simple. It's a very talented roster that is solely depending on quarterback play. I might be one of the few believers still in Anthony Richardson, but I think that he is the guy. Let's see if he can do it this year. But we are going to begin with, at number 6, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, initially, I had this video planned out to come out yesterday, and then, of course, the George Pickens trade happened, so I had to push it back for today, and, of course, I add them onto this list. George Pickens, to me, is the perfect player for the Dallas Cowboys. His vertical separation, his deep ball playmaking, everything that he does deep is going to benefit Dak Prescott and this Cowboys offense just so much. Cowboys team that, in my opinion, had a couple flaws heading into the season. Number 1, they had to address running back. Number 2, they had to shore up the offensive line. They needed a pass rusher next to Micah Parsons, especially after D-Law left. And maybe most importantly, they needed so desperately badly a wide receiver too. And so far this offseason, they've made a lot of really nice additions. The defensive line looks really good, at least on paper, especially in the edge rushing room. I still do have some concerns about the interior defensive line and whether or not they can actually stuff the run, but I'll hold out hope on that one. Of course, you do have Osa Odighizuwa, who's a total stud, and you added some linebackers to kind of help there. Offensively speaking, adding George Pickens next to CeeDee Lamb, adding a Jaden Blue, a Phil Maffa, of course, you added Javonte Williams. We'll see if those guys can get the job done. I just kind of personally would have preferred if they brought back Rico and maybe added like 1 or 2 running backs in the draft, but they went with this direction, and I'm not totally against it. And then on the offensive line, you bring in Tyler Booker, you bring in some more depth, and you rely on Tyler Guyton to improve and develop from year 1. And now I look at this Cowboys team and say it's a really good team that genuinely can compete for a championship. Now, I don't think they're going to win a championship, but if you watched my last video, which, by the way, go ahead and check out, I'll pin it up at the very end. It's a really solid video. I talk about the Dallas Cowboys. But in that video, I call the Dallas Cowboys dark horse contenders, meaning that I'm not going to favor them to make the playoffs or to make the championship games or anything like that. But I will say that I think if there's a team that can kind of come out of nowhere and be a team that goes to a championship or makes a deep playoff run, I think it could very well be the Dallas Cowboys. When you have star power like Micah, CeeDee, Dak Prescott, I think that's really going to help you. Now, granted, we don't really know what their coaching staff situation is going to look like just because we haven't seen those guys, and let's just keep it a stack. Let's keep it a buck. I was not a big fan of the Brian Schottenheimer hire, and even though I like what I've heard from him, I have to see it on paper because right now I think he's one of the worst coaches in the NFL, but of course he hasn't coached a game, so we'll have to give him a shot. But in totality, this is a Cowboys team that I think is very talented. It has the pieces necessary to go on a deep playoff run. And if we expect the young players in this roster to take steps forward, both rookies and second-year guys and third-year guys, then I think this team really can have a chance at being a really special unit. But let's go ahead and move on to number 5. I have the Seattle Seahawks. This one was pretty easy when it came to picking this team because they were like 1 game away from making the playoffs last year. And I would say this offseason, they got better in some areas and a little bit worse in other areas. But for the most part, I thought it was a necessary offseason to unload some of those big contracts that were looming and just get better talent around these guys. Defensively speaking, I think this team is bound to take a really nice step forward. Last year, it was a bit of an inconsistent defense, but I felt like they, statistically speaking, were pretty solid throughout. Now in year 2 of Mike McDonald, he adds some pieces on the unit. You add in a DeMarcus Lawrence, you add in a Nicky Monwari, and so on and so forth. And now I look at this team and just say, man, it's a really complete unit on the defensive side of the football. You're also hoping that a guy like Byron Murphy can develop, Tariq Woolen can just stay consistent, and so on and so forth. So I look at this defense, I think it's going to be a really special unit with McDonald leading the way, and I think at times that defense will win this team some games. But of course, a lot of the news that happened this offseason was on the offensive end, getting rid of Geno Smith in favor of Sam Darnold, replacing DK Metcalf with Cooper Kupp. It also does appear they're going to replace Noah Fant with Elijah Arroyo, and of course, drafting Gray Zabel. It's a very different unit from what it was last year, but I expect it to be a lot better. Number 1, because I love their offensive coordinator hire in Kubiak. I just think he's a really smart offensive mind who's extremely balanced, who's going to run the football first, rely on this offensive line, which I guess could be good or bad, and give Darnold some easy play action reads and just a lot of things downfield to really just create a lot of separation. You pair that in with 2 guys who can absolutely smoke you in the intermediate to underneath in JSN and Cooper Kupp. to go along with the speedster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling and a guy who can really open the field up in Elijah Arroyo. And I really look at this team and say it's a really fun unit that I think has some slight flaws to it. Like, I think the right side of the interior is a little bit weak. I also think they're missing like a true 50-50 ball winner on the outside. Obviously, Jake Bobo can do some of that, and maybe Torrey Horton can do some of that. But I think like a true, I don't want to say DK Metcalf-like guy, but like a DK, they could really use one of those guys. And then, of course, you're just relying on Sam Darnold to not look like late season Vikings Sam Darnold. You're hoping that you get like weeks 1 through, I don't know, 13 or 14 Sam Darnold, which I think you might be able to get. I think Darnold is a good quarterback. He's a little bit cheaper than Geno Smith. He's a lot younger than Geno Smith. He gives his team a longer window. And I think you pair that with a team that's extremely talented, with a great defense. I think this team has a shot to potentially make it. Now, do I think the Seahawks team is going to become a Super Bowl contender? Maybe a dark horse contender, but probably not a Super Bowl contender. I think right now the goal should just be to make it into the wild card, win a game or two, and see if you can go on a deep playoff run. And then next year in 2026, you kind of just finish up all the pieces you can do, finish up the offensive line, shore up the receiving core, so on and so forth, and figure out what other flaws you have defensively. And then after that, I really do think this team has a shot to make it. It also does help that their division is pretty open right now, although I do favor the LA Rams. I do think the Seattle Seahawks have a potential chance to win the division just outright. But let's go and move on to number 4, and I'm actually going to stay within the division. I'm going to talk about the Arizona Cardinals. Now, if you guys have been following this channel for quite some time, especially throughout this current offseason, you guys would know that I have been on the Arizona Cardinals bandwagon for probably the past several months now. Hell, for context, I actually thought they had a chance to make the playoffs as soon as last year. Of course, that didn't end up happening, but I think this year is probably their year where they can make that big jump forward. So a team last year that was so competitive with almost every single team they went up against, like they had competitive matchups against some really good teams that, you know, some would make the playoffs and some wouldn't, but man, they were really competitive with every single roster out there. Kyler Murray was just, you know, playing some really good football. And even though offensively speaking, I still think there are some issues. Like, I think they could really use a wide receiver too, as well as maybe use some updated offensive linemen. But I just think when you have Kyler, if you have Marvin Harrison Jr. take a step forward next year, James Conner, Trey Benson, you're going to get some production from those guys. Of course, Trey McBride gets the big contract, so he's going to be a big part of this offense. I look at this offense, I say it has the playmakers, it has the superstars and Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray to be a really good unit. But the unit that I expect to take the biggest step forward from last year is this defense. Last year, this defensive line was just not very good. It could not get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And this year, you add in a Josh Sweat, you add in a Calais Campbell, you bring in Walter Nolan, Dalvin Tomlinson, and you rely on guys like B.J. Ojolari and Darius Robinson to take steps forward. And I just look at this team and say, man, this front four now looks a lot more formidable on paper than it did last year. I mean, last year, again, just not a lot of bodies that were really capable. This year, you actually have guys who are veterans and some young pieces who have been there, done that. And the nice thing is, like Josh Sweat, it's not like he's changing a scheme. He's going from one D coordinator that he had a few years ago back to him. So that's great for him. Walter Nolan, I think, is one of the highest upside players in this year's draft class. Like, he can truly become a all-time great if he reaches his potential. And you look at the secondary, it's improving. You also brought in Will Johnson, who very well could end up being the steal of the draft because he fell at around 2. I mean, he is a ultra talented cornerback who, yes, is a little bit slower, has some injury concerns, but man, if he stays healthy, like, this dude could be your CB1. And if you got that guy in the second round, then you'll totally take that. Now, the hard thing for this Cardinals team that they're really going to have to kind of maneuver around is the fact that their division is pretty competitive. I think San Francisco will be in the thick of it. I think so will Seattle and definitely the LA Rams. And then you compare that if they were to, and then you take that and you look at the rest of the NFC. If this team were to try and make a wild card spot, there's only 3 spots to give to a lot of teams that are going to be going for it. You look at a team like the Dallas Cowboys, who I just talked about, the Seattle Seahawks, who I just talked about, several teams that I'm going to talk about here in a second, and the teams that already made it from last year's, and not to mention the Chicago Bears as well. I mean, you're talking about a situation where the Arizona Cardinals are really going to be in a fight to get into a playoff spot. Like, this might be a situation where a couple 10-win or 11-win teams might even miss the playoffs. So for Arizona Cardinals, I think you have to be going early, which I think they will. You got to be ready from day one. You got to win games early, and you got to go on some stretches where you're really dominant. And I think Arizona has the possibility of doing so because I really believe in this roster. I really believe in Kyler, and I'm really expecting a big step forward from Marvin Harrison Jr. in year 2. Moving on to number 3, I have the Atlanta Falcons. Now, you can make the argument that this should be more like a 5 or 6. I have no issue with that. I'm just going to have them at number 3. I don't think the order matters too much. My biggest issue with this Falcons team that I felt like they had to address in the offseason was, of course, adding some pieces on this defense. getting pressure on quarterbacks, forcing the ball out of quarterbacks' hands quicker, and just having some different options on the defensive side of things. And well, that's what they did this offseason. It wasn't necessarily a really busy offseason for the Falcons. I thought they were pretty quiet throughout, but honestly, I felt like it was kind of necessary. With that said, with the limited moves they did make, you bring in a Divine Diablo, a Leonard Floyd, you draft a James Pierce Jr. and a Jalen Walker and Xavier Watts. And now I look at this defense, and even though I don't think it's going to be a fantastic pass rushing team, I do think it'll be better from last year, like significantly better. And then you pair that with now a guy like Xavier Watts, and I think, man, this team has some depth. It has different variety. It can have different pass rush sets out there. You could throw different units to give some different looks, which is something that last year they had in some situations, in some spots, but not to this extent. This year, you generally do have a lot of different options. Not to mention, you're probably hoping that some of the guys you drafted last year will take steps forward, like a Rook, like a Braylon Trice, and so on and so forth. And if those guys can, to go along with this year's draft class, I expect this defense to take a significant step forward. Again, last year, I thought the secondary was pretty solid. It just kind of happened to be that your front four couldn't get pressure on a quarterback. And it wasn't until kind of late in the season when they sort of figured some things out. And once they did, the defense got better. I do expect it, though, to start from day one, where I think you have different options. You have some veterans who have done it. You have some young guys who can do it. And that's really going to benefit this team big time. You also expect a nice upgrade from Michael Penix Jr. over what they had last year. I mean, this was a team last year that had really bad quarterback play early on from Kirk Cousins until he kind of got into a flow. And then, of course, he kind of went back to being bad after that. Michael Penix Jr. steps in there, and I thought he had some moments that looked really sharp out there. I know statistically speaking, he wasn't like dominating out there, but if you were watching the games, you would agree that Michael Penix Jr. looked fantastic and was being competitive with some really good squads. And now you head into year two with him being probably the full-time quarterback, with him getting all the first-team reps, with him getting some preseason snaps. He should be ready to go by week one. And man, I think he just has a cannon of an arm. He can make all sorts of throws. You pair that with Bijan, you pair that with a solid offensive line. And I look at this team and just say they have the pieces necessary to make a deep playoff run. I think what also does help this team when you put it into the context of what I talked about earlier with how competitive the NFC is going to be, they're in one of the more weak divisions. I mean, Carolina, although they'll be competitive and better this year, I don't think they're playoff contenders quite yet. Same thing with New Orleans, and the only team you're really competing against is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And even though the Buccaneers are a damn good team that, let's be honest, they could very easily win this division again, I do think Atlanta can give them a run for their money like they've done the past couple years. They're talented. They finally have good quarterback play. You look at the rest of the roster, some good running backs, some good receivers. Offensive line did lose their center, which that's going to suck, but they'll have to replace that one. And a defense that should take a significant step forward. I expect this team to take a step forward with this defense, and obviously year two of Raheem Morris, who I'm very much rooting for because he seems like a really good guy. So we'll see. I think this Falcons team has the capability to be really good this year. It just has to be shown on paper. Number two is the Chicago Bears. Now, let's just keep it honest here. The Chicago Bears feel like one of those teams that always have good off seasons or always make a move or here or there that gets you really hyped for this roster, and then the next year they kind of underperform. I think that could happen this year, but I don't think it will. I look at this roster and say they have addressed their biggest issue. For years now, it's been the offensive line. It's been the lack of pressure on quarterbacks, especially last year. But this year, man, they just went crazy. Ben Johnson stepped his foot in there. He put the throat on the owner, said, hey, we're making moves. We're going to compete next year. And they did so. Getting Joe Thuney, who I think is a fantastic guard, Drew Dalman at center, who's a great run blocker, and Jonah Jackson at right guard, who, when healthy, is a pretty solid guard as well. You already had Darnell Wright. You have Braxton Jones. You add in Ozzie Trapilo. Look at the offensive line. It's looking quite nice on paper. You then go into the draft and you get, of course, Colston Loveland and Luther Burden to just add even more juice to this receiving core. A unit last year that was already really good, but now you get young guys in there who have an unlimited ceiling, and it can really open up this offense. Now, I don't like their running back room. I really thought they were going to address the running back room a lot earlier. They still could maybe make a move, though, but we'll see if DeAndre Swift can get the job done. You still have Roshan. You still have Kamanung guy who I think has a chance to actually get some reps this year. Like, I thought in the draft, he was a bit underrated. So he went pretty late, and I think he could have a spot with the Chicago Bears. But we'll have to wait and see. I think it's definitely going to be an interesting unit. You're for sure banking on Caleb Williams. There's no excuses now, let's be honest. I guess there are some excuses. He's still young. He needs time to develop. But in terms of not coming out the gates playing well and just playing poor in general, there's really not an excuse for him to do so because he has all the receivers he can necessarily want. They can run 12 personnel. They can do all sorts of things. And now you have an offensive line. And now you can sit in the pocket, make the proper reads. You have a head coach that's going to give you some easy things early and cut you loose eventually. This is going to be an offense that I think can move the ball, can score points. And when you pair that up with the defense that also got better in a lot of ways, adding a Dayo Odeyingbo, a Grady Jarrett, and then, of course, your secondary was already good from last year. Your linebackers were already solid. So this is a team just in totality that is really well put together with a good offense, with a good defense, and with a quarterback that I think has a very, very, very high ceiling and a very, very good chance of being an awesome quarterback. So if it all comes together next year, it's going to be really difficult for the Bears not to make the playoffs. Now, again, we have to reiterate this thing, though. The NFC is going to be competitive, and the Chicago Bears happen to be in, let's be honest, probably the most competitive division in the NFC. You're talking about you're going to go up against the Packers. You're going to go up against the Detroit Lions, and we can't sleep on the Minnesota Vikings. If the Vikings get good quarterback play from their quarterback and JJ McCarthy, that's going to be a team that wins 10 plus games next year. So there is a chance that the Chicago Bears might miss the playoffs just purely based off of how damn competitive the NFC North is. I mean, let's be honest, there's really not a great chance that all 4 teams make the playoffs. I mean, that would literally be like every single wildcard spot would be taken up by an NFC North team, which very well could end up happening, but I'm not going to predict it to happen. So one of these NFC North teams is going to ultimately fall out of the playoffs, and if there was one that I think we should maybe be a little bit cautious on, it might be the Chicago Bears, just because they were a 5-win team last year that really haven't proved anything quite yet. So we will wait and see. Again, I have them at number 2 because I really believe in this roster, and I think everyone should believe in this roster. And if you believe in Ben Johnson, they very well could end up in that spot. So we will have to wait and see. But at number 1, the only AFC team in this video, I guess outside of the honorable mentions with the Bengals and Colts, but the only one within this list, I got the Las Vegas Raiders. I think this team looks significantly better on paper. Now, I will admit it's going to be tough for them to win the division, but I think they could easily push for a playoff spot. Geno Smith is a massive upgrade at quarterback from what they had last year. They also have a good backup quarterback in Aiden O'Connell. Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, Jack Betch. Not the greatest receiving core, but Jack Betch really is going to open this offense up in a lot of ways. He's just a reliable option that can play slot. He can play on the outside. You give Geno Smith that guy, he can kind of be a less athletic JSN sort of guy. Ashton Jeanty, I don't have to talk about him. He is just fantastic. I mean, he is going to carry this ball 20-25 times a game, and he very well could end up being Offensive Rookie of the Year. He could have 1,200 plus rushing yards in his rookie season. You pair that up with obviously one of the best tight ends, if not the best tight end in the league in Brock Bowers, and an offensive line that at least on paper looks solid. And now you have some depth there with Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers, who maybe you could start next year if they develop nicely. So you look at this offense, it's not a finished product. I think they need like one more true wide receiver, and I think maybe some pieces on the offensive line you'd like to find some upgrades on. Of course, you'll wait and see what these young guys look like, but this offense should be a lot better from last year. Like, this was a team last year that was not particularly great, offensively speaking, but now I think this unit will be top 15-ish, especially now that Geno Smith's in the building and he can just make things happen. Pete Carroll's also there, so he knows how to get a team into the playoffs. It's just a really solid unit that's going to rely on their stars, Bowers and Jeanty, and Geno Smith's going to make a lot of plays downfield. So I really believe in this offense, and I think defensively speaking, they're going to be just fine. Defensively speaking, you didn't really get to see the full Christian Wilkins experience, so I think you'll see that next year. Malcolm Kuntz also is back. You're hoping that Tyree Wilson steps up, so you believe in your front four. You also believe in your linebackers. Losing one of your linebackers sucked. I can't remember his name, but he's on the Patriots now. But now you bring in a Landon Roberts. You have Devin Wyatt, Luke Masterson. Hopefully those guys can get the job done. Your secondary is a little questionable. That is the one sort of weak spot on this team. However, you did take Darian Porter, who perhaps could make some meaningful snaps in this season. So we will wait and see on that. But I do worry about their cornerbacks and how they're going to play. But I like their safety, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. But in totality, I think the AFC is a little bit more open than the NFC, although there's a lot of good AFC teams out there. But I look at some of the AFC teams and just say, you know what? I think a team like the Raiders could slip in there. This could be this year's Denver. This could be just a team that nobody really predicts to make the playoffs, but ends up making the playoffs just because of how talented they are and how everyone just kind of sleeps on them. You bring in a veteran quarterback who wants to win now. You bring in a veteran head coach. You pair that up with some young superstars, a solid offensive line, and a defense that should be top 15 in the NFL. And you look at this roster and just say, this team can make the playoffs. Now, I don't want to make it seem like the AFC is just an easy conference to win, because it's obviously not. And within their own division, you got 4 teams that all can make the playoffs. So the Raiders will have a tough battle. But I think of the AFC teams, this was the best team that I think can go from being a non-playoff team to a playoff team. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, do you agree or do you disagree with this list? And if you disagree, let me know what team you guys think should be on the list. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.